Welcome to the Changing Earth podcast with Sarah F. Hathaway, blending survival, fiction, and fact to bring you entertaining education that'll help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sarah F. Hathaway.
Hello, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 3A. Today we're going to continue on with the day after disaster story and see where Erica's going. She got a little bit of a surprise last episode, so we'll have to see how all of that works out for her. So let's go ahead and dive right into the day after disaster story. Chapter 3. Erica had to react fast. The water was melting her skin. She flipped the table up on its legs and climbed on top to escape the flow of toxic mush that had entered and was aiming to melt her flesh right off her body. The stench it released was incredibly horrible. She stood on the table in awe, but was quick to realize the implications as the backside of her body began to burn with pain. She knew she had to get washed off, but the water had come in much faster than she had realized, and it filled her cement cavern with a foot of toxic waste. Great! Now what am I going to do? She sobbed. I'm going to die right here on this table. No, pull it together. You have to wash this muck off. Her survival instincts had begun to kick in again. She remembered the little bottles of water they had kept for certain picky customers. Erica didn't know if the toxic sludge that had flooded the stairs, and had run down to fill the floor area would eat through her clothes and shoes as well as her skin. It didn't appear it had done so yet. Only the skin that had been exposed was inflamed. She stepped off the table onto a toxic film that still barely coated the stairs. The cupboard door flew open as Erica tore into it, desperately reaching for a case of small water bottles. She took them to the table. Then she carefully took off her clothes and flung them into the watery abyss below. She was not going to tolerate the threat of any more of that sludge getting onto her skin. She poured the cooling water over her screaming burns and wondered what they looked like and how bad they were. She would be able to coat some of the burns with the healing power of the little tube of Neosporin, but some on her back were unreachable. She wished her husband was there to rub lotion on her. She remembered his soft touch as he had rubbed sunblock over her sunburned body. But now it was just her. She would have to just leave them to heal on their own. Once she was rinsed off and had some salve on the throbbing skin, she went to the cupboard that contained the uniforms. She had to stretch out over the sludge in order to reach the fresh clothing. She dressed, but then quickly removed the clothing. Her blistered body had flared out at the soft cotton, and it was more than she could take. Erica thought she could just go without the clothing, but the cold that was encased in the cement crept up on her until she could not decide which was worse, the cold air or the pain of the clothing. In the end, she devised a way of wrapping her body in what little gauze she had and the cheesecloth that the chefs had used to supplement the gauze. This gave her some protection and cushioned her body from the rough elastic waistband. In her new wrap, the pain subsided, and after redressing herself, the warmth began to comfort her again. Her candle was burning low by the time she was done caring for her wounded body. Knowing that she had no way to obtain her lighter, which provided her with flames, she grabbed another candle, a bigger one this time from the box in the cabinet. When she originally lit the candles, she had used a larger one for the lower area, figuring that she would need that one longer. But her current dilemma had proved that assumption wrong. She was at a complete loss on how to put an end to this nightmare, now that things had managed to become even worse than they were before. She puzzled at why the water did not seem to drain from the lower floor even though there was a drain. Then she realized that the water was more like slime. It was so filled with debris that it clogged the drain instead of flowing through it. Erica's stomach rumbled, and she responded to its needs. She was hungry for something more than fruits and nuts, so she began to search the cupboards for anything else that could be eaten without cooking it. Some dehydrated milk with oatmeal and water became her final choice. She devised a way to heat it in a pot over the candle and ate a dinner of warm oatmeal with a tangerine. She ate, still standing in the toxic film. Her blistered skin was a constant reminder of just how dangerous the water that had run down the stairs and filled her chasm was. After eating, she had nothing to do but think. Standing there, skin burning, she stared into the abyss below. Suddenly a thought flashed through her mind. There was daylight when I opened the door. The whole restaurant was gone. Of course, it was the dam. I bet it broke when the quake hit. The water flooded in. I wonder how much water is out there. Did the water sweep everything away? Erica was somewhat correct in her estimation of the problem. She had gone to college, and while she was there, she did a report on the implications of building a new dam by her house. She knew that once the reservoir behind the dam was filled, if anything should happen to the fragile structure, a 100-foot wave would descend upon the Capitol building in Sacramento within an hour. In its wake, it would leave a disaster area resembling a nuclear catastrophe. The dam had been built despite the demonstrators that had visited the building site daily while construction had been in progress. On that particular evening, while Erica had been at work, the great Mother Earth smashed the dam with her vicious shaking and let the destruction sweep her pestering children away. Hardly anything of a capital city remained. People, houses, cars, pets, crops, everything had been drowned in water. It unleashed thousands of tons of toxic chemicals that had been stored by humans for various purposes. The sludge that remained ate anything alive that dared to challenge it. Erica had been saved by that grumbly customer who had sent her down to the shelter for their very best bottle of wine. She was the only one left alive in Sacramento. Her situation was bleak, and she knew it. What am I going to do now? No one is ever coming to get me. How would they know I survived? I'm half burned by that slime. I can't swim through it. I can't even walk through it. I'm going to die here. I'll never make it home to my family. Maybe Vince wasn't even home when it happened. He could be dead too for all I know. I can't even sit down. Erica was frantically screaming and wailing in sheer misery. Tears rolled down her face, and Erica flopped down on her stomach on the table. Lying on her stomach was fine. Her back was straight, and her body fit perfectly across the table. Completely drained of all will to survive, Erica continued to stare down at the water that now filled the floor area. She desperately wished she could get to the supplies that she had utilized down there. As she stared, the candle that she had lit down there before the water came in began to dance and flicker like a strobe light. One of the empty plastic jugs that had formerly been stacked in the far corner was floating by. Its movements were accentuated by the strobe lighting. As she stared at it, an idea came to her. If only I could float on top of that water jug. I could float out of the sludge. Wait a minute. Maybe I can't. The water delivery guy was going to come tomorrow, and there were even more empties than normal to collect because it was a holiday the week before this. There must be at least 10 of those things floating around. But how would I sit on them without getting wet? Only I had a piece of wood to hook them to. The implications of her statement clicked as soon as she laid her head back down on the oak table that she had lugged to the top of the stairs before the water came in. She stood up and jumped down to the concrete landing. She placed the table onto its side and began to kick the legs off of it. Once the legs were lying in a heap on the floor, Erica began to wonder how she was going to hook the huge water jugs to the solid oak slab she had created. Before she could attach the jugs, she would have to fish them out of the toxic sludge. How to do that was a mystery in itself. She needed a very long pole, but her space was limited to the stairs. She went to the cupboards and began to rummage through them. She did not find a pole, but she found items like the cooking string and a box of duct tape that might come in handy for building her craft once she had obtained the essential materials to make it float. Erica began to think of the daily operations of the restaurant and what they would have used to suit her current needs. She remembered the high, vaulted ceilings lavishly painted and the giant chandeliers hanging from it. When dust had accumulated, they had used a giant feather duster hooked to a long pole to reach the otherwise unreachable heights. They had stored the long pole in a piece of PVC piping that had been cut in half and hooked with U-bolts to the ceiling of the shelter over the stairs. She looked up and saw the familiar tubing. Her eyes lit up, and she ran up to the landing. Standing on her tippy toes, she could just barely reach the PVC pole. She pulled it from its sheath and began to wonder what she could attach to it to make a hook at the bottom. She was at a loss. Finally, she decided that the two-pronged fork that they had used for stabbing meat off the barbecue could be bent so that the tongs formed a hook. She took the fork and pressed it against the concrete floor until the tongs rounded up towards her hands. When she was done, she grabbed a roll of duct tape and attached it firmly to the pole where the duster had formerly been attached. Now, with her new tool in hand, she was ready to start fishing. She was excited by this new purpose, and it eased the pain of her injuries. She grabbed her candle off the table, but then decided she should just light another one. Erica could not afford to lose the only light she had when her lighter lay on the other side of the toxic pond. After she had the additional flame burning, she went down the stairs to the last one not covered by the sludge. She put the candle down on the stair by the cupboard door and began to move the pole towards one of the jugs. As Erica predicted, 10 of the plastic jugs floated in the mush, but only half of them would be reachable. Erica decided she would deal with that issue later. Erica reached out with the pole and began to roll the jug around until she could see the handle. Then Erica hooked the bent fork through the handle and pulled it back. It worked! The jug was moving closer. The only problem Erica could foresee was how she was going to pick the jug up when it was coated in the toxic goo. Erica thought fast. She was too excited about getting her raft built to let this problem slow her down. All she had to do was stand up to reach the cupboard that held the box of rubber gloves. She put a pair on and grabbed the jug out of the green water. She put the jug 2 stairs up from where she sat, so it would not hinder her fishing the next one out. And once she had collected all of them, they could be washed later. She pulled the next 2 jugs out in the same fashion. After some problems hooking the handle, she decided it would be easier to just drag the jug in with the pole. The rubber gloves worked perfectly at protecting Erica's frail skin from the burning sludge. On the 4th jug, though, Erica put her hand too far into the water, and a drop had burned her arm as it ran down the inside of her rubber glove. She had to remove the glove and get a new one. She also washed her skin carefully with water to avoid further burning. Erica came up with the solution to this problem while she was washing. She went and got one of the long-sleeve cook shirts and put it on. Then she held the cuffs while she slid her arm into the rubber gloves. The last step she took was to wrap the area where the rubber glove met the long-sleeve shirt in duct tape. With her arms covered, she could work without fear of reaching too far into the water or having some of the water run down into her gloves. The delay that the burning drop had caused was actually a blessing in disguise, because all but 2 of the jugs had floated into reach of the pole during the cleaning. Before long, 3 of the last 4 stairs were stacked with the 8 water jugs. Erica rinsed the jugs lightly with as little water as possible because she only had 2 flats of water left. She had no idea how long it would take her to find more water once she left the shelter. Now all her materials were together and she began constructing her raft. Erica's biggest difficulty was figuring out how to attach the tabletop to the water jugs. She was tired and hungry, so she went rummaging through the goods in the cabinets again. She picked out a peach and an apple and a banana that were really starting to look gross, but she mixed them with oats and nuts and ate them anyway. She sat down on the top stair to eat. As she ate, she contemplated her dilemmas. She had quite a few rolls of duct tape and figured it would work, but how much would it take? She didn't want to deplete her whole supply with just this one task. She moved the oak table flat on the floor of the landing. By now the sludge had all drained off, and she figured it would make a great area for construction. Erica envisioned a craft kind of like a makeshift pontoon boat. Erica thought the most resourceful way to put it together would be to attach a row of 4 jugs to one another with the duct tape to form one of the pontoons. She would have to seal the tops up tight so that only air would fill the space at all times. She covered the opening in the 5-gallon jug with the rubber glove and then held it in place with the sticky duct tape. Then she started to attach one jug to another with the tape. Pretty soon there was a line of 4 jugs all put together and securely fastened. She laid that one aside and made the next row. Now she had all the pieces of the raft assembled. But how could she put it all together? She thought about just using the duct tape, but that would be a whole lot of duct tape, and it had just taken a lot to connect the jugs together. Her supply was dwindling quickly, and she didn't know if she had enough. She needed something that, when wrapped around an object, would cover space faster than duct tape, but was waterproof and sticky like the duct tape. She thought back about when she and Vince had gone skiing. They needed the four-wheel drive that the truck had, but if it was snowing, their gear would get all wet. To avoid this, they had wrapped their gear in plastic bags. Erica dismissed this idea because the plastic bags would only loosely wrap things. She needed to connect the jugs to the table. It made her feel good to think about her husband. She kept thinking about him and her dilemma. She remembered talking with him about what his boss did when he was driving his truck in the rain and needed to keep his tools dry. He had wrapped them in cellophane. The plastic wrap had formed to the tools and had kept them dry. That was it. There was a whole box filled with individual rolls of cellophane in the cupboard. Erica ran over to the cabinet and grabbed a roll of the prized wrapping. She laid all the pieces of her craft out together in the way that they would be put together. She began to wrap the jugs and the table in the plastic wrapping. She started wrapping the length of it first and then the width until the plastic wrap covered everything and was holding it all together well. She had used every roll except one to wrap the craft, but knew it was a good investment of resources. Erica was not sure that the cellophane alone would hold her craft together. She would have to use some tape to help it out. She had enough duct tape so that once she had reinforced the craft in a coating of it, she had 4 rolls left. The craft was finished. She took it down to the water for a test float. She put it in the water and the jugs held the tabletop far away from the toxic sludge. She was triumphant, but very hesitant about climbing aboard. Whenever you rode in a boat, especially a raft of this size, you got at least a splash of water on you. Usually this was no big deal and a welcome relief from the summer heat, but in this case it would be very painful. She had protected her arm skin from the burning liquid. She remembered her plastic gloves she had used to reach for the jugs and looked at her craft. That was the solution. She would wrap herself in the same fashion as the boat. She decided a coating of cellophane under a layer of duct tape should be worn over her clothes. That way, it would allow her to move around but still protect her from the sludge. She left a gap at the waistline that could be unsealed and resealed so she could still relieve herself. Her body was completely covered in gray duct tape except for her yellow rubber hands and her completely unprotected head. Finally, feeling a little safer, she boarded her craft. She had brought the pole that she had used for fishing out the jugs so she could direct herself around the watery space. It worked perfectly, and she moved with ease. She headed right for the shelf that held the purses. She pulled them off the shelf and piled them in a heap on the raft, and then she grabbed a hooded sweatshirt as well. There was nothing else of use above the water, but she thought about the drinkable water and the wine that lay below. Just then her eye caught a gleam of the wine she had stashed by the table before the water came in. After trying to hook the pole to the milk crate that held the full bottles and pull them directly up to the craft, she found that leaving her head unprotected was a bad idea. The water had splashed as the raft bobbed under the weight of the crate, and even though only a small drop had hit her, it had burned a spot on her neck under her ear. She had decided that nothing was worth the risk of suffering more burns and left the bottles where they lay. Erica was not aware that the toxic sludge had eaten away the corks in the bottles anyway. Once she docked her craft at the stairs, she took her reclaimed goods to the top. She went into her purse and got one of her few remaining cigarettes, lit it, took a deep drag, and sighed. She knew she had to do a lot if she was going to escape this dungeon alive. As Erica began to consider what she would need for the long voyage ahead, she thought of food first. There were lots of nuts and oats left. There were also raisins, dried apricots, prunes, and some very overly ripe fruits. She really had no idea how long she had been living on this diet, but thought maybe she had been there about 2 weeks or so. Regardless, she was starting to feel the effects of the lack of proper nutrition. She longed for some protein, but this was all she had. She needed bags to pack her goods in, and thought the purses would work well. She would also take one craft filled with the remaining fruit that was actually worth taking. Since the landing at the top of the stairs had dried out, Erica laid the last tablecloth she had on the landing and began to empty the contents of the purses. The first one she picked up was a black leather bag that had one large pocket for all its contents. First, she took out the wallet. She was riddled with guilt about going through somebody else's things, but figured that it didn't matter now anyway. She opened the wallet and looked at the California driver's license inside. It had belonged to Kelly Burns, a 16-year-old girl who had just gotten a car and a job at the restaurant as a busser. She had $100 in her wallet, and Erica took it. She also found a pack of rolling papers and took those out too. She threw the wallet into the watery depths when she found that there was nothing else of use in it. Even though Kelly was not legally old enough, she had developed a habit of smoking, and Erica removed a full pack of Marlboro Reds from her purse. The rest of the contents had little value right now, so she just threw them in the water. Erica continued emptying the contents of the other purses in the same fashion. She would check the ID, remember the person it belonged to, look for valuable items, and then throw the unneeded things into the water to meet the same watery fates as their owners. It was a solemn event. But she had found $500, 5 full packs of smokes, 2 half packs, 6 lighters, a knife, some mace, a pair of sunglasses, and 4 books of matches. The last purse she had to clean out was her own. She pulled out her own wallet. She rubbed it slowly, like a genie lamp, to relinquish all of its memories. She thought of her mother-in-law, who had bought it for her. Her in-laws had been vacationing in Washington when the quake hit, and Erica wondered if they had felt the effects of it. She opened her wallet and looked immediately at the picture of her beloved Vince. It was a picture from the year they had gotten married. Vince stood regally in his black dress shirt, and his loving eyes glared into her soul. "I will make it home. I will make it home," was the only thing Erica could think of. But as soon as Erica turned the page to reveal the picture of her son and her mother, she wept huge tears of pain. "I will make it home. I have to. I know they're alive. I can feel them pleading with the Lord to allow me to come back to them, and I will. I always said that if something happened to our fragile environment, I would survive. I read all those books about herbal healing, hunting, survival techniques, and martial arts, all to learn how to survive if I had to. And now I do. I have to pull it together, get what I need to get to land, and get the hell out of here." She closed her wallet and continued cleaning her purse out. She emptied out old receipts and shopping lists. She would need to make room for more important things now. She opened the last pouch and saw her slingshot. It was a weapon not commonly used, but Erica had trained herself proficiently with it. Erica also had her hunting knife there because she had gone out looking for a pesky raccoon that had gotten in the chicken coop at her in-laws 2 nights in a row. The circular metal ball thrown with the slingshot had not proven fatal, but that pesky raccoon would definitely think twice about bothering those chickens again. Along with the slingshot, she noticed an unused tampon. She did not need it now, but Erica had never kept good track of her cycle. It was often unpredictable and could be delayed when she was under stress. She wondered when it would come. This made her think about future supplies for that certain female problem, and she was relieved when she found a big box containing smaller boxes of the protective cotton in the cabinet. She took out 5 boxes. This many boxes could last her at least 5 months, and she said a silent prayer that she would not need that many before she hit land. She figured that once she reached shore, she could buy more and would not need such a large supply. All the purses were now empty, and she began packing. She thought that if she could get the door open all the way, the raft would float out the door. She dragged the raft back up the stairs to the landing. She could stock it there, and then when she opened the door, the shelter would fill with water and she could just float out. Erica put the crate of fruit onto the back of the raft and then 2 purses full of oats already mixed with dehydrated milk and nuts with the dried fruit. She decided it would be best to put everything into crates so she could wrap the sides and attached it to the raft so it would not fall off. She put all the remaining water on the raft, along with more knives and extra clothes. She also loaded one of the extra outdoor table umbrellas. She brought Tupperware bowls and cut the sides off a square Tupperware container so it could be attached to the pole and then used as an oar. She packed all the candles and reached for the first aid kit. She had ransacked the kit since she had been there and realized there wasn't much of use left. She had used the entire bottle of antiseptic and the tube of Neosporin on her burns. She still had half a bottle of Tylenol, and there was still some gauze left, so she took them out. But then she changed her mind. The first aid kit was plastic, maybe waterproof, and it would probably float if it ever fell in the water. So Erica threw out the empty items and put the gauze and the Tylenol back into the kit. Even though Erica had studied a little about herbal medicine, she was not confident enough to know what she should use for which ailment. She didn't have a book or anything like that with her. She grabbed some spices that she thought would be helpful and packed them into Ziploc baggies before putting them into the first aid kit to make the most of any available space. Erica continued pillaging the cupboards. She packed a medium and a small saucepan into one of the wooden crates that she had hooked to the craft. Erica had attached the crates to the craft in sort of a U fashion. This would give her an area to sleep, an area to row in, and plenty of storage space. Erica constructed the paddle for the craft by removing the hook from her PVC pipe and attaching the square Tupperware piece that she had cut to it. It would not be ideal, but it would have to do. After she had her raft loaded with everything her brain could imagine she would need, she decided to refine her attire one more time. She had removed the top half of her cellophane and duct tape suit, so her hands would be free to work. But she could no longer afford that luxury. She remembered the new burn on her neck and knew she would need to protect her head as well. She thought the hooded sweatshirt would work well as an upper body and head protection. Over the sweatshirt, she wrapped cellophane. Then she wrapped the duct tape over it to complete the suit once again. Except this time, she tucked her hair into the hood of the sweatshirt and duct taped as much of her head as she could without covering her eyes, nose, or mouth. She would probably pull her eyebrows off when the tape was removed, but if it would keep her alive long enough to reach the land, it was worth the loss. Finally, she put on the sunglasses she had found to protect her eyes and put the rubber gloves back on too. She was all ready. One last rummage through the cupboard assured her she had packed everything she could. She looked over the raft and decided it would be wiser to cover the tops of the crates for the initial launch. When she was through, she had a half a roll of cellophane and one roll of duct tape left. The most dangerous part of the launch would be getting the door open again. She would have to trust that her suit would protect her because it would take everything she could muster to budge that door. She remembered that the table was what helped her push the door open last time, and she would not be able to set it up the same way this time. She decided she would have to wedge herself in between the raft and the door and push on the side of the table. It gave her a smaller area to push on, but hopefully it would work just the same. In position with the door loop in hand and her legs bent for pushing, she decided it was time. Erica pushed, and as the door opened, the water flooded in, but this time it did not burn. Her suit held, but she did not know how long it would hold out for. She used all her might and forced the door all the way open. The raft was beginning to float, so she climbed aboard quickly. The force of the water wanted to push the raft down the stairs, but the slope of the ceiling and a strategically placed oar prevented it. Soon, she forced the raft out the door. So Erica finally makes it out of the shelter that she's been stuck in. And, I drew from some of my past experiences working at restaurants and things like that to craft this area where she got stuck in, and gave her a little bit more supplies than, what might be down there. But I really wanted to write in the MacGyver sequence of the book. I always loved watching that show when I was younger. And so I really wanted to craft in that area of survival skills where you have to use all your resources available to be able to survive and get out of this challenge. So that's where I drew from to write the book, to write that chapter. And today in the supplemental video, I have Captain William E. Simpson with us today, and he is going to talk to us about resourcefulness and also small watercraft survival. So it's a great video. It was a lot of fun to do that interview. I believe it was actually the very first interview that I ever conducted for the Changing Earth podcast. So Captain Simpson really got the treat of the naive interviewee. But go ahead and check that video out. That is season 1, episode 3B. Thanks very much for joining me again. Go ahead and check out the next video, which is going to continue on with the day after disaster adventure.
Thank you for joining Sarah for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster at www.author-sarahfhathaway.com. If you love this podcast, please head over to iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.